This is looking at the poem 2:30 by U.A. Fanthorpe. And if you can get yourself a copy of the poem, that will either be in your anthology if you're looking at this as part of IGCSE Edexcel, or if you Google it, you can get a copy online and just cut and paste it into a document that you can then print out. But it would make sense if you have a read of it before we start talking and see what you can make of it by yourself. So I'll just scroll through this slowly. And then hopefully you can get a flavour of it and think of what you think it's about on your first reading. So looking at it straight away then. First of all, the title, the expectations of the title. Now, we know that this is a time, right? And it's a specific way that we have of agreeing when something's going to happen, of a point of the day. But generally, time is conceptual. And the story of this poem, to look at it, is a boy who is too young to really understand what time means. Because if we just kind of flick through the tercets, the three-line stanzas really quickly, we've got the idea that once upon a school time, he did something very wrong. I forget what it was, right? So we're in the world of school and the boy has done something that deserves a punishment according to the school system, although the narrator can't really remember what it was to give us any details. And he gets told off by the teacher, the capitalized she, and she gives him detention. He must stay in the schoolroom till 2:30. But then we get this extra set of parentheses, this extra bracket, the aside, that says, but basically she hasn't taught him how to tell the time. So he's left in the classroom, and being left in the classroom, he starts to run through all the times that he does know to see if any of them will help him. And he knows getting up time, or time you were off time, or time to go home now time, or TV time, time for my kiss time, that was grand time. And all of these times kind of are associated with activities or things that he's told to do. So he knows all of the important times that concern him in his daily routine. But this 2:30 is a new idea. So he doesn't have any way of knowing what to do. And he's standing in the classroom and he can see the clock face, but he doesn't know what it means. If you think of, before you learned how to tell the time, big hand, little hand, etc., doesn't mean anything to him. And he just waits there. And as he waits, he kind of falls into this position of thinking, well, do I exist here now forever? Because all he can really do is exist in the moment. He can smell the kind of dying flowers on the teacher's desk. He's conscious of the fact that his thumbnail's hurting because it's got a piece of skin hanging off. He's conscious of the breeze outside. And then all of a sudden his teacher bustles back in again and says, oh, you're still here, off you go. And then with that, it's just as simple as kind of putting him back into the kind of known framework and his routine and all the times that are familiar with him or to him. But this kind of experience stays with him, presumably into his kind of later childhood and adulthood, about how he kind of entered this no man's land, this kind of bizarre nowhere place, because he was completely left in limbo by not knowing how to tell the time. So story-wise, we've got, little boy does something bad, gets put in detention, doesn't know when to take himself out of detention. Teacher comes in a long time later, realizes, oh, you're still here, off you go, right? Looking at it in terms of the analysis, it does quite a few things that you'll probably want to pick up on your notes if you're writing about it. And if you're comparing this to any other poems, again, just be kind of thinking with half a mind as we're going through it. Oh, that reminds me of such and such a thing, maybe in Prayer Before Birth, or that reminds me of such and such a thing in any of the other poems that you might need to match it with. So we start with this once upon a school time, and we start with the language of kind of fairy tale and magic and fantasy, that this is going to be a slightly kind of unreal experience for him. And we take this idiom once upon a time, okay, an idiom, a well-known phrase or saying, and we insert this kind of school. word into it. So once upon a school time, he did something very wrong. And the effect of this capitalization here is to kind of exaggerate or use hyperbole in terms of what he's done. And it also expresses the idea that he's not entirely sure why he's been told off. And this is the kind of maybe the first inkling we get between the adult world and the childhood world, that the little boy has done something and it's something very wrong, but he's not exactly quite sure what it was. And in fact, neither is the narrator. So we have this kind of tension, I suppose, set up between what is taken as being a very bad thing when you're a little kid and the kind of insignificance in the grand scheme of things in real life. Because these brackets, these parentheses, parentheses, plural, parenthesis, singular, has our first person speaker, our narrator, saying, well, I forget what it was, undermining that importance. So we've got kind of fairy tale feeling, this idea of excessive kind of wrongdoing, but then undermined comically by the speaker, highlighting this tension between the adult and the childhood world. Now, kind of meter-wise or rhythm-wise, there's something quite interesting going on here, because this once upon a school time, he did something very wrong, is trochaic. Okay, now you may have heard of iambic meter, which is D-dum. Now a trochee is a dum-dee. Okay, so again, it adds to that kind of fairy tale nursery rhyme style that we've got this kind of beat. But then here, this is a different meter, and this is made up of anapaests. You can say it's anapaestic meter, and that is actually a D-dum rhythm. So you have maybe the kind of childhood side of this nursery rhyme kind of sing-song couplet here, with then the idea of a kind of maybe more mature, maybe kind of more sensible adult voice interjecting there. Now we start with a conjunction. So here we can kind of add on this quality of his memory. These things are kind of adding up in his head. I did something very wrong, and then this happened. And again, we get the capitalized she, the anonymous teacher, but it emphasizes the idea of her unquestionable authority. And she said he'd done something very wrong. Okay? And again, this kind of tension here, he knows that it's something very wrong because the teacher has told him. So again, it's the kind of adult framework, the rules of school, and not quite adding up to this innocent child who really doesn't know any better. And she said we have this kind of line break here, he'd done what? And then the enjambment takes it to the emphasis on something very wrong. And must, that idea, the modal verb, he has to, he's not free to do what he wants. There's this kind of obligation on him. He must stay in the schoolroom till 2:30. And again, you've got the kind of monosyllabic nature of this. It's a kind of order and instruction. You can almost hear in the monosyllables, almost see her wagging her finger at him, stay in the schoolroom till 2:30. There, and that end stop giving that kind of precise order about it. And we've got then another set of brackets and more parenthesis where the speaker is kind of pointing out all the time the difference, the dichotomy. Okay, a dichotomy is a tension. So the dichotomy between the kind of teacher's world and the very young student's world, because she has judged that he's done something very wrong. And this has kind of aggravated her. And so she forgets, she hasn't taught him how to tell the time. And again, this capitalized concept there, she hadn't taught him time. I mean, that's almost kind of comic in itself, that it's such a huge idea to kind of just teach somebody time. And yet, you know, we know that really it's kind of reduced to telling the time on an analog clock. But she forgets she hadn't taught him time. Again, sort of the end stop. That's the deal. That's the kind of final thing that he's stuck with. And again, the fairy tale language kicks in again here. You know, he was too scared at being wicked to remind her. You know, there is this uneven balance of power. There is this disparity, this lack of equal match. If something is disparate, it's not in even quantities or even shares. And he's too scared at being wicked. You know, this isn't he's been a bit naughty, he's been wicked. So it's the language of fairy tale, the exaggerated language of childhood, the language of nursery rhyme, really. So we take it that he's been abandoned by the teacher in the classroom to do what we would know as a detention. And he tries to run through what he does know because he's trying to make sense of the world and the experience. And we have this repetition of he knew a lot of time. He knew all these times. All these times he knew, but not 2:30. So if we look at what's going on in these two tercets, okay, tercets, 3-line stanzas, we have the idea of the repetition of new, that idea, this concept of the framework he's familiar with. And we also have the repetition of time. And again, in these compounds here, it's all squished together, it's all moved together, because he doesn't understand the kind of way that adults are defining time. He's hearing this kind of noise. He's not hearing the expression, time you were off, right? He's hearing the kind of, okay, that is what happens. If somebody says, time you were off, we go. If somebody says, getting up time, I have to get out of bed. He's not hearing them as separate words. He's just hearing them as a labeled concept almost. So those compounds are kind of showing, again, his lack of real understanding of all of these rules and expectations that he's subject to. And the idea of, you know, the repetition of new this time, new this time, new this time. It's kind of almost tied together in this little envelope, if you like. And this is called something called chiasmus, where you start on one idea here and you end on it again, just to kind of parcel it up. But you can just say, you know, it's enveloped in, or it's kind of framed within, if you can't remember any of the fancy rhetorical terms. Because, you know, this wraps up all of his knowledge. You know, this is what he knows, and his routine is get up, off you go to school, time to go home, watch the TV, Gran comes around, have to kiss Gran. That's what he does, right? This is a new experience. He doesn't know 2:30. And the important times are the important times for him, okay? So we've got that idea. We've also got this kind of ending in the same word all the time is a little technique called epistrophe. It's the kind of opposite of anaphora or anaphora. If you think that anaphora is where you are using the same word or words at the start of successive clauses or sentences, think of I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream. Epistrophe is where you put the same word at the end of the successive clauses or sentences. Okay, but again, repetition will do if you can't remember. And it's emphasizing the idea that time for this boy isn't a capitalized conceptual time that it is in the adult world. It is just part of a noise that dictates his life, that links to something adults do. We then looked down and said he knew the clock face. And upon the idea of clock face, we get the personification of the clock. You know, he's all on his own, and so he's looking around for other beings or so. The little eyes and 2 long legs for walking. Now, he doesn't know that these are, you know, the kind of hands of the clock. You know, it's just whizzing round away. And presumably our 2 little eyes are, you know, there are sections in the face of the clock that on its face. But he couldn't click its language. Okay, so he doesn't even have the language about telling the time to say the hands on the clock or the ticking of the clock. He knows it's clicking, and that click again has got the onomatopoeia to it. And we've got some kind of consonants there, couldn't click. You know, it's mimicking that tick tock as he's trying to really listen to it and understand what it's saying. And here we've got this end stop, lots of little end stops here, 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 and here, just leading to this kind of waiting. And again, caesura there, this kind of pausing, what's going to happen next. His life is kind of coming in fragments, almost kind of dictated by, okay, like this rhythmic beat from the clock. But he has no choice other than to do so. He waited because he's been wicked and he's now abandoned and he doesn't know what's happening. And he waits beyond once upon a time, out of reach of all of the time fours. And he knew he'd escaped forever. And we have that enjambment in this kind of line break, leaving that kind of hanging in suspense or in some sort of stasis, right? Like stasis being like a frozen kind of form, or stasis. You know, he's gone beyond all of the times he knows. You know, once upon a time is the idea of, you know, stories and little kids kind of knowing that framework. And he's way beyond all the time for this, which is up here. None of those make sense anymore. And he knew. So all the things, you know, we've got repetition of this know again. And this develops into this. Well, all he can know now is that he seems to be outside every single point of existence that he's ever known. He's just there, right? He'd escaped forever into, and here we have, this is the anaphora or anaphora here, what he's been absorbed into. Okay, so he's been taken out of all of the things that he knows, and he's kind of looking around to see what is his experience of the immediate present. And it's the smell of the old flowers. Okay, a chrysanthemum is a really kind of garish looking blousy flower. Okay, very Instagrammy. But the flowers are on her desk. Might indicate, you know, she hasn't changed the flowers. Not only does she forget about the boy, but she hasn't changed the flowers either. And it might even, you know, explain that time is running away with the teacher as well as kind of abandoning the child. You know, she might know time, but she's maybe kind of too rushed or too hurried to operate within it properly. But he's stuck with the smell of the flowers. This line is interesting because it's this kind of, I suppose it's a technique called synesthesia, right? And synesthesia is where you mix up the senses. If you say something sounded yellow or tasted green or so, it can't happen. But we've got the noise is hangnail made. And a hangnail is, if you imagine the side of, like the side of the skin on a nail comes off. You know, sometimes when you break a nail and you've got that piece of skin and you think, don't touch it, and you still pull it anyway and it hurts. That's a hangnail, right? So it's almost as if none of the rules in his world are now making sense, because his hangnail, the pain in his thumb is making a noise. He can only focus on that. He can smell these flowers, and you know, he can hear presumably the air outside the window, and he's escaped forever into ever, right? It's a really kind of strange little concept that he's gone into this kind of indefinable, inexplicable. If something is inexplicable, fancy way of saying unexplainable, kind of limbo, this kind of nowhere world, which again kind of echoes the earlier ideas of the fairy tale. You know, he's lost. And then another kind of start with a conjunction. You know, we've got conjunction here, conjunction here. You can put conjunction there as well. These ideas of these things coming up and hitting him like additional information. Also, so we get, you would write about that to say, you know, Fanthorpe's repeated use of conjunctions at the start of lines builds on the impression of the boy's experience. Okay, that's how you do that one. But then we get the kind of direct speech. And on my version, check on the anthology version, but on my version, she's not capitalized there. Wonder if she's kind of reduced. Now she's there. Just double check in the anthology if it's still capitalized. There's, you know, it's consistently presenting her as somebody in authority. But if it's not capitalized, then it's worth saying, you know, all of a sudden she's not so scary anymore. Let's see which version you're using. But we get the dialogue, the direct speech, and, you know, my goodness, I forgot all about you, right? So we've said before, you know, she's not a very good kind of mistress of her own time, but she scuttles in, and again, she's kind of reduced by that scuttling. You know, it's kind of, at one point she was this big, all-powerful kind of moral figure of the fairy tale who had banished him for doing something very wicked, and now she's kind of more like a little insect or a little kind of creature that's just kind of hurrying in. I forgot all about you, run along or you'll be late. And all of a sudden, you know, it's very dismissive, and it's again highlighting this distinction. This is a massive experience in the boy's world, you know, and it's really nothing to the teacher, showing again the kind of imbalance of power there. Run along or you'll be late. And again, this concept of time, he doesn't want to be late. He doesn't really know what's going on. And with that, she slots him back. You know, he's taken from this no man's land of what am I doing, where am I, what's going to happen to me, and it's just right. Regular life is now kind of neatly and conveniently resumed. He's back into school time. He gets home in time for tea time. Next time, no time for that now time. And you get the impression that he's been a little bit late coming back because, you know, his mum's like, well, there's no time for that now. And you know, so this continues to have this impact on him. And then again, you know, conjunction there, but this final addition, he never forgot how once by not knowing time he escaped. And it's interesting that this is an escape that's presented 3 times as a kind of escape, I think. We've got where was the escape thing? It was somewhere up here. He'd escaped forever. Oh, it's for escape and forever and together. So the second reference to escape. But escape is kind of when you get out of something that was trapping you, whereas, you know, the teacher had sort of detained him or banished him. It's ironic that, you know, he's put in detention and this is an escape of some sort, because it's kind of, I suppose, indicative of the fact that his life is ruled by adult rules and he's taken into nothingness for a minute. And like so many poems that you encounter at kind of GCSE or around about this level, this idea of growing up, this idea of loss of innocence, gained experience, realization of how the world works. You know, for a moment, he escaped into the clockless land. You know, if you think of how much of your life is governed by time and obligation, but, you know, he just manages a moment of escape from that. And again, we've got that word forever there, you know, the idea of what's beyond time. And there time hides tickless, waiting to be born. So again, that clock. Time is personified again as being kind of elusive, yeah, hiding away, and it's waiting to be born, waiting to take hold. Okay. And I guess this idea of, you know, time is inescapable, even in this kind of no man's land, then time's just lurking. It's going to get you at some point. So thinking about, you know, what to do with this, I would make sure that your notes really do kind of reflect the main points that you'd want to talk about if you're doing this for an exam. So you might want to group this into, you know, how the teachers presented, how times presented, the use of fairy tale language, the use of the compounds, the use of repetition, the especially the anaphora and the epistrophe, the idea of the onomatopoeia or the personification of the clock and clock face and time. All of these things being your kind of go-to, okay, Fanthorpe does this, this, and this in her poem to create a sense of, right? The overarching kind of theme is this dichotomy, this tension between childhood innocence and adult experience, you know, adult rules, childhood freedom, and how I suppose the freedom of our lives is gradually eroded as we grow up and realize the rules, and how really kind of when you're a lot younger, the adult world doesn't make any sense. You know, you don't have any sense of autonomy, of independence. You're just kind of at the mercy of lots and lots of things that you don't understand. Okay, I hope that helps. Bye now.